Hi guys, and thanks for joining me for this video. In this video, I'm going to be assembling a German chocolate cake. To start out, I have two 10-inch chocolate cakes, and I'm going to just trim so that way they're nice and level. After leveling my first layer, I'm going to use some buttercream to secure the bottom of my cake, and then center it on my 12-inch cake board. Once I'm happy with it being centered, I'm then going to use my serrated knife again to level this cake. To make trimming easy, I put my cakes in the freezer for a couple of days, and then I transfer them to the fridge for 24 hours. This way, I'm trying to cut a cake that's nice and cold, but not completely frozen solid. This German chocolate cake is going to be semi-naked, so I'm going to take the time to clean off my crumbs so I don't get any crumbs in my buttercream. The next step is to soak the sponge with a simple syrup. I use a simple syrup to stop my cakes from drying out and to keep them nice and moist. Simple syrups are especially good for cakes that are going to be exposed to air for long periods of time. And since it's going to be a semi-naked cake, some parts are going to be exposed, therefore simple syrup I would suggest. Next, I'm using a Swiss meringue and I'm going to make a buttercream dam. This is going to stop my filling from poking out. This filling is a coconut pecan filling and it's very, very thick, so I don't think it's going to flood out of my cake. However, with a semi-naked design, I want to have nice smooth sides. Therefore, I'm using this buttercream dam more as a stopper to make sure that I don't have any pecans or coconut peeking through and ruining that really seamless outside. My next step is to smooth out my custard filling to make it nice and flat and even so I have a nice flat cake. From what I understand about German chocolate cakes, the star of the cake really is this coconut and pecan custard filling. Therefore, I decided to add just a couple more scoops and level that out to make sure I had enough filling for all the cake. In the end, I had about 1.5 inches of filling to about 4 inches of chocolate cake, which I thought was a pretty good ratio. Once I thought my filling was nice and flat, I wanted to add a little more flavor because I thought the pecans weren't really showing through. To remedy this, I put some pecans in the oven and toasted them for roughly 10 minutes, and then I added that to the middle of my cake. This is one example of why it's so important to test your flavors and test your bakes before you give them to someone else. In testing my coconut and pecan filling, I thought it was really coconutty and I had almost no pecan flavor. Instead of remaking my filling, I knew that toasting the nuts and adding them to the middle would add a nice flavor balance for the pecans and add some texture, giving my cake a really nice balance. Once all my pecans were added, it was time to top up my second layer of chocolate cake and then fill in all the gaps in the middle with some more Swiss meringue buttercream. I chose Swiss meringue because of its super silky texture and it has, to me, a really light flavor that I thought would not overpower my cake. I chose to add 1/3 cup of chocolate ganache, dark chocolate ganache, to my Swiss meringue buttercream to make it better pair with my cake, which I thought worked really well. It was a nice light chocolate flavor, nothing overpowering, and just really kind of accenting what was already in the cake. Since I'm choosing to do a semi-naked cake design, my crumb coat is actually going to be my final coat as well. To create this design, I'm just adding a couple tablespoons of frosting at a time and smoothing it around with an offset spatula, and I'm just trying to get it to be roughly smooth so I can then use a bench scraper. One tip I have for making a semi-naked cake is to keep the caramelization on your edges. A lot of times bakers will cut off or trim off the edges of their cake so that way it looks nice and even and it's all, you don't have any extra brown bits. However, I find that when I do that, I end up with a lot more crumbs in my crumb coat. Now, normally I would cover the crumb coat with another layer of frosting so it really wouldn't matter what was in that layer. However, because my crumb coat is my only layer, I wanted to make sure that my outer layer was completely crumb-free. The only way I could do that is by keeping the caramelization on the cake. If you are making a semi-naked cake and you think you completely have to take off the caramelization for whatever reason, I would make sure you take off your caramelization and then completely freeze your cake before you frost it. This ensures that all your crumbs are going to stick with the cake and not be pulled off with the frosting as you remove frosting to create your naked look. My sides are looking decent, which means it's time to move on to the top of my cake. This is one downside of frosting your cake sides first, because as you can see, I'm pushing a lot of my buttercream from the top outwards toward the sides of my cake, creating this lip. This means that I have to then use my bench scraper again to smooth out those sides and remove that lip that I wouldn't have had I frosted the top of my cake first. So because I knew what this lip was coming, I didn't actually perfect my sides. So you can see my sides have a little bit of air pockets and a lot of lines. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to stop where I was at. It looked okay. Go to the top of my cake, get my top super smooth, and then move back to my sides to finish out that layer. This is also the time to decide how naked you want your cake to be. So naked cakes and semi-naked cakes can literally mean no frosting on the outside to very minimal frosting, or something like I have where it's like 85% frosted, but some cake peeks through mostly at the bottom layer. So one way to ensure that your naked design looks symmetrical is, if you want symmetrical, is to make sure that your cake layers are exactly even. You can do this by trimming your cakes. So think back, remember how when you trim your cakes and take the caramelization off, you might add more crumbs. This means you need to really freeze your cakes and get them completely solid before you then frost your cake to make sure that you don't have any crumbs, but you then get a really nice naked cake design. I was okay with the look of my cake at this point because it looked a little rustic, which to me, German chocolate is a little rustic, and my sides were mostly smooth, and I had, I think, enough cake peeking through to call it a naked cake. Which means it's time for my final frosting step, which is to smooth out my top once again. I'm just using my palette knife to scrape the sides inward to create a nice flat top. And now it's time for my favorite part, the chocolate drip. This chocolate drip is a semi-sweet chocolate ganache, which is made with 50% chocolate and 50% heavy cream. I let it cool for about 30 minutes using the fridge and my counter, and once I thought I had the perfect drip consistency, I transferred it to a squeeze bottle to then do my drips here. I like my drips to be pretty random, so as you can see, I'm using a light pressure to add my drips to my cake, and when I want a longer drip, I'm going to pause my squeeze bottle, add some pressure, let the drip go down the cake, and then keep moving. When adding chocolate ganache to your cake, it's imperative that you use a cold cake so it doesn't completely just run off the side of your cake. Before I actually added this chocolate ganache, I put my cake in the fridge for about 20 minutes until my buttercream was nice and set. I wanted my cake to have a little more chocolate, so I added roughly an inch or an inch and a half of chocolate to the top, and I'm using a spatula just to kind of smooth that out and filling in any gaps that I have. I thought it was going to add just a lot of glitz and a lot of glam to the cake and make it look nice when I added the filling to the middle. To bring home the German chocolate theme, I added a couple more scoops of that coconut cream filling to the top of my cake. I thought using this ice cream scoop actually made a really nice rustic look. However, I did know that my box was only 6 inches tall and having these scoops this tall would be really pushing it. So I flattened them down using my offset spatula, and I flattened it down just to the edge of the chocolate so it didn't completely overflow. Another way to decorate this cake would have been to not add the custard top, but to completely fill the top with chocolate ganache. With the rest of my Swiss meringue, I'm going to do some swirls. So I like to do kind of the clock method. And so I do 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. And then I go back and fill in the spaces in between. I find doing swirls this way makes my swirls a lot more even in my cake. Instead of just doing them one after the other, I'd probably end up with really uneven swirls and a really awkward number. And so with this, I had 16 roughly evenly spaced swirls, which was perfect for this cake. Last but not least, the last of the decoration, I did every other swirl, topping it with a pecan. This pecan was toasted in the oven for, again, roughly 10 minutes to really bring out that flavor. And then once I finished that, each other swirl got some toasted coconut. Again, adding a little bit of crunch and also adding a little bit of different flavor because the coconut on the inside was not toasted. So just adding those little bits of flavor definition that really make this cake stand out. And with that, my cake is completely done and I absolutely loved it. And I hope you guys did too. This is probably like the first or second cake that I stopped decorating it, took back, and was completely in love. I had no issues, nothing I was like, oh, I wish I did this better. Like I thought it looked so classic and so timeless, and I could definitely see this in a bakery one day. So I hope you guys got some ideas from this video, and if you decide to make a German chocolate cake, make sure you tag me at Baking and Powder so I can see what you guys are doing out there. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you liked it, you guys know what to do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Until next time.